The morning sun broke through the thin curtains, lighting up the small apartment with a soft golden glow. The alarm had been ringing for 10 minutes. On the bed, a young man lay staring at the ceiling, his phone buzzing beside him. He knew what the message said before he even looked. It was his coach reminding him that practice started in 15 minutes. He sighed, dragging a hand across his face. Every muscle ached. Every thought whispered the same excuse. You deserve a break. Outside, the world was already awake. The street below buzzed with footsteps, horns, and life moving forward. He sat up slowly, staring at his running shoes by the door. They looked worn, tired, almost as if they were asking him, "Are we really doing this again?" He thought of the rain last week, the pain in his leg, the lack of sleep. All the reasons he could give for not showing up, all the excuses that sounded so reasonable, so safe. He stood up anyway. The floor felt cold beneath his feet, but the cold woke something inside him. He grabbed his shoes, tied them tight, and whispered to himself, "No excuses." As he stepped outside, the air hit him like a wall. It was crisp, sharp, and alive. The sky was painted with streaks of orange and silver, a reminder that the world does not wait for anyone. He began to jog slowly at first, each step heavy and reluctant, every breath burned. Every movement felt like a question. Why are you doing this? He remembered the nights when he had promised himself that he would change his life. He remembered the dreams that kept him awake, the goals that once lit fire in his chest. But somewhere along the way, comfort had become his cage. He had started believing that waiting for the right time was the same as progress. He had started lying to himself that he would begin tomorrow. Now, as his feet hit the pavement, he realized that tomorrow had arrived 1,000 times, and he had wasted it each time. He ran harder. He pushed against the voice in his head that begged him to stop. That voice sounded familiar. It sounded like the version of him that always gave up. Halfway through his run, the pain grew sharper. His lungs screamed for rest. He slowed down near the bridge, gripping the metal railing for support. The city stretched before him, bathed in the light of a rising sun. In that moment, he remembered something his father once said. Excuses sound best to the person who is making them. He had laughed then, but now, those words felt like a mirror reflecting every time he had quit. He closed his eyes, feeling the wind against his face. He could go back home. He could blame exhaustion, the weather, or bad. He straightened his back, lifted his head, and started to move again. This time, his steps were not fast, but they were sure. He could feel the strength building not in his legs, but in his spirit. Each step forward was a promise to himself. A promise that no excuse, no pain, and no setback would define him anymore. He was no longer running from failure. He was running toward purpose. The city around him began to change as the morning grew brighter. Shops opened. Children hurried to school with their parents. Workers rushed past with coffee cups in hand, and there he was, a lone figure running with fire in his eyes while the world carried on as usual. A taxi driver honked at him as he crossed the street, but he barely noticed. His focus was locked on the rhythm of his own heartbeat. It was loud, powerful, relentless, just like his will. He remembered the first time he had given up. It had been 2 years ago on the same track, under the same sky. Back then he had blamed the weather. He had told himself that the wind was too strong, that he would do better next time. But next time never came. Until now, he smiled bitterly at the memory and kept running. He realized that life had never been waiting for him to be ready. It had been waiting for him to stop hiding behind reasons. He was done waiting. As he reached the training ground, his teammates were already there. Their laughter filled the air, the kind of laughter that hides exhaustion and effort. When they saw him, they cheered, clapping him on the back. "Look who finally decided to show up," one of them said with a grin. He laughed softly, out of breath, but not out of spirit. He wanted to tell them about the battle he had just fought in his mind, about the thousands of reasons he had nearly listened to. But he just nodded and said, "Let us work." The coach watched from a distance, arms crossed, eyes sharp. He did not need to say a word. He could see it. The change in his runner's stride, the fire in his stance, the refusal to break. The whistle blew. They began their drills, one after another. The ground beneath him felt familiar now, almost like an ally instead of an obstacle. He fell once, his knee scraping the dirt, but he got up before the pain could speak its excuses. Sweat poured down his face. His arms trembled. The burning in his lungs returned, but this time he welcomed it. He understood that discomfort meant growth. It meant he was alive. Around him, others slowed down, gasping, complaining, but he pressed forward. Not faster, not easier, just with more heart. Each repetition became a lesson. Every drop of sweat carried a memory of past excuses melting away. He could almost hear the voice in his head fading into silence. For the first time, there was peace in the struggle. Hours later, when practice ended, he collapsed onto the ground. The grass was cool beneath him. He stared at the sky, breathing heavily, his chest rising and falling like waves. The clouds drifted lazily above, unbothered by time or pressure. He smiled, because for once he had nothing to explain, nothing to justify. He had shown up, and that was everything. The coach walked over and stood beside him. He looked down at the young man, eyes full of quiet pride. "You are not the fastest yet," the coach said. "But you have something most people never find." The young man looked up, confused. "What is that?" he asked. "The decision to stop lying to yourself." Those words landed heavier than any lesson he had learned before. He nodded slowly, feeling them settle into his bones. Because he knew the coach was right. The hardest person to be honest with is yourself. As he sat up, the sound of the city hummed in the distance again. Life was waiting. Challenges were waiting. Tomorrow would come with new pain, new excuses, new reasons to quit. But he would face them all the same way. Head high, heart steady, whispering the same two words that had changed his life forever. No excuses. He rose to his feet, brushing the dust from his knees. The sky above had turned a deep blue now, the kind of color that makes you feel infinite. He looked toward the horizon where the sun was climbing higher and felt something stir inside him. A quiet, steady confidence that no longer needed to prove anything to anyone. He started walking home, muscles sore, clothes soaked. But every ache in his body reminded him of what he had overcome. The street seemed different now, brighter, even though it was the same. Because the world always changes when you change the way you face it. He passed a shop window and caught his reflection. Sweat dripping, face tired, eyes alive. For a moment, he just looked at himself, not with judgment, but with pride. He whispered again quietly to the person staring back, "You did not give up today." He walked on step after step, carrying no excuses, no regrets, only resolve. And somewhere deep inside, he knew that this was not just about running. It was about life. It was about showing up when no one is watching. It was about refusing to surrender to comfort. Because the real finish line is not on the track. It is in the mind. And as long as he kept running toward that, he knew he would never truly lose. Ahead of him, the sun broke fully through the clouds, spilling gold across the rooftops and streets. He lifted his head, smiled, and began to run again. Not to prove something, but because he finally understood that every day is a new race, and the only rule that matters is this: no excuse. As he ran, the sound of his footsteps became a rhythm of purpose. Each beat echoed against the pavement like a drum of determination. He was no longer the man who made promises to start it tomorrow. He was the man who decided that tomorrow begins today. The street slowly came to life around him. Vendors arranged their carts. The smell of freshly baked bread drifted through the air. Buses rumbled by, carrying people to their routines. But he was not part of their hurry. He was running for something deeper, something unseen but deeply felt. The sweat on his brow was no longer discomfort. It was a symbol. A reminder that progress demands pain and growth requires discomfort. He had learned that if you wait for perfect conditions, you will never begin. If you keep waiting for when you feel ready, you will die waiting. He passed the park where he used to sit, making excuses. He remembered his old self sitting there with headphones on, watching others train, telling himself that they were just so lucky, that they had better opportunities, that life had given them something he did not have. But now he knew the truth. Luck favors the ones who refuse to stop trying. He ran past that same bench and smiled, because he knew he would never sit there again. His breathing grew heavy. Each inhale felt like a battle, each exhale like a small victory. But he did not slow down. because he understood that comfort had been his greatest enemy. And he had spent too many years bowing to it. He reached the hill at the edge of the neighborhood, the steep one that had once defeated him. He stared at it, remembering the countless times he had turned back, telling himself he would climb it next time. But this time, there would be no next time. There was only now. He placed one foot forward, then another. The incline was brutal. His muscles screamed. The wind pressed against him like a silent challenge from the universe. But he pushed harder. Each step was a declaration. I am stronger than my excuses. Halfway up, his legs burned so fiercely he nearly stumbled. A flash of memory struck him. The nights he had cried out of frustration, the mornings he had woken up angry at himself, the people who had doubted him, who had said he would never change. Their voices returned echoing like ghosts. But this time he smiled, because their doubt had become his drive. Their disbelief had become his discipline. When he reached the top, he stopped and looked out over the city below. The skyline shimmered under the rising sun, a mosaic of golden light and glass towers. It looked alive, chaotic, imperfect, yet beautiful. He spread his arms and took a long, deep breath. In that moment, he realized something powerful. The view was not the reward. The reward was becoming the person capable of climbing. He stood there silent for a long moment. Then he whispered to the wind, it was never about the hill. It was always about me. He sat down on the cool grass, the air fresh and still around him. He thought about all the times he had blamed circumstances, the missed chances, the unfair breaks, the people who had hurt him. And he saw how every one of those moments had been an invitation to rise, not retreat. He had spent years trying to change the world around him. But the truth was, everything had changed when he did. His phone buzzed. There was a message from his younger brother. A training again? It said. Why so early? He smiled and typed back, because I wasted too many mornings sleeping through my potential. He put the phone away, stood up, and stretched his arms toward the sky. He could feel the warmth of the sun touching his skin, the kind of warmth that makes you believe in new beginnings. He began his descent down the hill, moving with a confidence that came not from speed, but from certainty. He knew that no one could take this feeling away, the feeling of having conquered himself. As he reached the bottom, he saw a young boy trying to run, stumbling with every few steps. The boy's face was red with frustration. He was about to quit, but then he looked up and saw the man coming down the hill. Their eyes met. The man smiled and said just 2 words, and no excuses. The boy hesitated, then nodded. He took a deep breath and started running again. His steps were clumsy, but his spirit had changed. The man continued walking, watching the boy in the distance. And in that moment, he realized something profound. Strength is not just about what you achieve. It is about what your courage inspires in others. He kept walking past the streets, past the people, past all the places that once reminded him of failure. Now they were symbols of transformation, because he finally understood that excuses are the walls we build to protect ourselves from the pain of progress. And the only way to live fully is to tear those walls down with relentless honesty. The road ahead stretched endlessly, but for the first time he was not afraid of the distance. He was excited for it, because he knew the journey never ends for those who refuse to stop. He whispered once more, not as a promise this time, but as a truth he had earned with every drop of sweat and every scar of effort. No excuses. He broke into a jog again, his figure moving into the horizon, his shadow growing smaller beneath the rising sun. And the world kept spinning, not changed by his words, but transformed by his will. For he had become the kind of person who no longer asked, "Oh, what if I fail?" but instead declared, "What if I fly?" And with that thought, he ran faster, lighter, freer, not away from his past, but toward the boundless future waiting just beyond the next hill. No excuses ever again. Toward the boundless future waiting just beyond the next sunrise. When he finally stopped, his chest rose and fell with calm power. The city behind him faded into soft morning haze, but within him burned a fire that no storm could ever put out. He looked down at his hands, the same hands that once trembled with hesitation. Now they were steady, strong, alive with purpose. He realized that every scar, every setback, Every sleepless night had been a teacher in disguise. He smiled not out of pride, but out of peace. Because he no longer needed validation. He no longer sought approval. He had found what every human searches for, belief in himself. As the first ray of sunlight kissed his face, he whispered to the wind one final truth. Discipline is freedom. Excuses are chains, and I have broken mine. Then he turned away from the horizon, ready to face the day that awaited him, ready to live the rest of his life with no regrets, no hesitation, and above all, no excuses. The story of one man's decision to change had ended, but for everyone listening, their beginning was just about to start.